Today's conversation, I have a cat in my lap, and that's not a euphemism for anything else. It's a literal cat. Uh, I'm talking to somebody who I have huge respect for and love as my brother. We've only recently met, but have had lots of conversations on Zoom, in men's group support calls, and all that kind of stuff. So before further ado, please tell us, who are you?
Hi, Jason. My name is Kapil, and I am the founder of an organization called Nibana. The website is nibana.life. And who am I? That's a really broad question. I'm a man. Um, I am a sensitive man. I am someone who has gone through a major transformation, well, maybe more than one, but the major one that I like to talk about is moving from a success or achievement based corporate career, and also along with that a long-term relationship that ended in um, divorce,
Mhm.
which kind of like went side by side to transforming my life completely, and moving into my own business, moving into transformational coaching, moving into learning and building and teaching a new paradigm of relationships, and rediscovering my own sensitivity as a human being and as a man, and remembering that I think for a long time in my life I learned how to be in this world. Like,
Mm.
I think after probably sort of early teen years or maybe even earlier, there's this idea that oh, what do we do in life, and we learn lots of things from our families, from our friends, from our culture. Oh yeah,
Mm.
you do this and then you'll be successful and then you'll be happy in life. So I went down that trajectory, like I think most people do, and then rediscovering that I was on that path of success and achievement, but probably living someone else's life. Um, then finding my own blueprint, and then now redesigning for last sort of 6 7 years, redesigning my life from ground up, from the place of what my blueprint is and how I want to live my life and how I want to design my relationships. And that's what I teach people. That's what I coach people on. Um, so that's me.
Fantastic. There's so many like different little kind of offshoots now that I'd love to prod on. And this phrase, redesigning my life, my company's mission is redesigning humanity,
Mm.
but that all starts with individuals. So it's like redesign your life to redesign humanity. And what I'm hearing is that you were cooking various other people's prescribed recipes and maybe getting some dishes out of that, but they weren't quite the dishes. You maybe weren't so satisfied with cooking other people's dishes. You wanted to cook your own dish. So what are the kind of significant differences between your previous life and your new life that you're designing now? What are kind of like pre and post kind of comparatives? uh, Usually I don't ask for comparisons because it's kind of an ego thing, but it's more in a design. We have this notion of moving, like design, one of the descriptions or definitions of design is moving from current state to intended state. So what was your current state, which is now past, to your more and more emerging intended state? Can you like illustrate some differences?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, I think, and your analogy is beautiful as well about cooking someone else's recipe. I love that. Um, so I think the the before and after. Let's talk about that. So before, life was good. Like life was good in that sense that people would look at it from outside and would definitely say that this is a guy who's made it in life. Right? I come from a small town in India, right? When I was growing up, success for me was something like, oh, if I had 1,000 pounds, like 1,000 pounds, if I ever made that much money, that would be success. And I ended up living in central London, uh, right next to the Thames, and when I would walk around there, it was like, oh, I have made it in life.
You were making the £1,000 in central London, and I was like,
Right,
why am I living the worse life than in a little village in India?
right. And so there's a place, I think, uh, life was good in that I was making enough money. I had a good lifestyle. I People would look at me. Definitely my family, my friends, my social circle would look at me and it's like, oh, he's living his life. He's like, he's done that. He's
He's
been
living at
there.
large.
He's living at large. Uh, and don't get me wrong. I was I was I was pleased with my progress at some level. I was actually working hard. I was successful in my own sort of way of looking at success. However, the thing that stuck, a couple of things, as I said, one was my relationship ending. Right, I was married. We were together for 11 years. It came to an end, and for a couple of years after that, I was just like living a wild kind of life. But at the back of my mind, it was always this question. I was like, oh, this is something I want to learn, how to be good at relationships. I want to learn how to be good or great with women. That was like an area that was always mystical. It's like you can learn all of that, but there was always mystery surrounding women. So that was something in the back of my mind. And the second thing was, I think, you know, living in London, uh, now kind of again a bachelor life with enough cash coming into my bank account, good job, and I wouldn't say like completely aligned to my purpose, but I was working on something that made me happy in a corporate job. But I was like, I don't know what to do with all this money that was coming in my bank
Mm.
account. I would like go out, go to the bars and pubs and nightclubs and go on vacations and all of that kind of nice stuff. But it was just like, okay, more of the same, more of the same. I remember sitting one day and just thinking this to myself. It's like, oh, if I keep going like this, life is going to be pretty boring,
Mm.
like I was 35 at the time. And I was like, if I keep going like this, 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever, maybe this is like halfway of my life, midlife crisis, call it midlife crisis,
Mm-hmm.
call it whatever.
Mm.
But I was at that stage where it's like, oh, if I keep going like this, life's going to be pretty boring. And there must be more to life
Mm-hmm.
than just this. Like I've ticked all these boxes, but it can't be like this is like the, you go to these places where you either go to concerts or you go to some places where you see people in their um, mojo. You see
Mm-hmm.
people who are like just completely aligned to who they are and what they are doing. And there's something about these people which is like they have access to a part of their soul that I think I didn't have at that time.
Mm.
I often sat in my room thinking and feeling there was this part of my soul that I wasn't able to touch. It was almost like, oh, there was a time when I was young, I was able to
Mm.
have access to that part of
Yeah.
my soul, but I didn't have that anymore. And I didn't know how to
Mm.
get access to that part anymore. So, so life was good, but dull. Like it was definitely in monochrome. It was not technicolor.
Mm.
Um, and that kind of led me, those two areas, like relationships and then this part around success, were the two things that led me to go on a journey to like understand what these things are. And now, and like this is 8 years down the line, I think, oh, here's one more thing I want to say is someone asked me when I was starting on my journey, someone asked me, what do you want in life? Like I was starting a program and they gave me like a contract, a desire contract, they used to call it. And in that desire contract, they say, okay, what is your biggest desire in life? And I was like, what do you mean? I had
Yeah.
never asked myself that question. What do you want? You know? And when someone asked me that question, I had no answer to that.
Yeah,
And
it's like a forbidden thing to even think about.
right, right. And it's like we're just on this autopilot, trying to achieve things, trying to get somewhere without actually thinking, what do we want, you know? So I went on this journey. I started like for 2 years, I was on this sort of, I left my job. For 2 years, I was deep in personal growth work. And for the first year, I was like, okay, I don't know what I want. Maybe if I just spend some time understanding who I am and what I want, that would be a good thing to do. And that's the question I asked myself and started on this path. And man, it was a fun, it continues to be a fun
Yeah.
journey, but then the first couple of years were just like, whoa, okay. You know, when you start to learn about your shadow, once you start to learn about all these things that in popular culture we are told not to even think about, we are told that those are all the negative aspects of your personality, and we just like shove them under the carpet. And so once I started to understand all of those things, it's like, oh wow, like this is who I am. And once I got connected to my blueprint, that's what I call blueprint, like understanding who are you. And then when you get in that spot, I think what you want is just a natural outcome of it. Then suddenly kind of, you know, your compass moves away from, I want to do this job because it will make my friends happy, it will make my family happy, it'll make my parents happy. It kind of like moves away from this, like, oh, is it what I really want to? So now, and I know it's a long answer to your question, but now I think the place where I live my life from is that I don't have that question in my mind, that, you know, that access to that part of my soul that I didn't have. I live from that place now. I have full access to my emotions. I have full access to my sensitivity. The place where I used to think, you know, I was told vulnerability is weakness. And that's how I lived most of my life. But now I live from this place like, no, if that's who I am, I live my life from that place. I have a deep sense of joy in every moment. And that has become the foundation of my life. And now, you know, I'm running a business, but you know, I was in IT, I was a tech guy. And now I coach people. I used to think that coaches were fraud.
Yeah.
You know, until I got into it, and I spent like I started working with people. I never intended to be a coach, but I started working with people and I saw how people's lives started to change. You know, that light bulb moment when you work with someone and that light goes on, it's like, oh wow, this is what's possible. And the kind of um, like joy that I feel in my body when that happens, I feel so fully aligned to my purpose, so fully aligned to who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. So that's where I live my life from now. So I think part of what in our company Nibana, um, it comes from a Hinduism word. So in Hinduism, nirvana has a different meaning to what it is in Buddhism. In Hinduism, it's about bliss. It's about that we are on this planet and our soul is looking for experiences so that it can learn how to be in a prolonged state of bliss. That's the idea. Like that's the purpose of life in Hinduism, right? And the way you do that is three different places in life. One is your material life. So it's not that that life is excluded. And when we say material life is your purpose, your relationship, money, everything. That's one area. The second area is your what we call eros, which is the intimacy and sexuality, you know, like having full expression of that. And the third part is values, your values, the dharma. You know, it's like how you live your life, how you contribute, service. So those three things, and you have to find your freedom, your bliss in those three areas of your life to have an experience of your soul where you can find freedom and bliss overall. So that's kind of where the idea of nibana came from, and that's what we teach now. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating how it almost maps one for one with my life as well. uh, IT guy turned into a coach, even though I started coaching when I was playing volleyball semi-professionally way back when I was 14, 15. But I didn't quite, there's kind of some sort of difference between sports coaching where you can sort of more physically measure and observe somebody's ability to follow through with a ball, right? If they come to you and they can't even pass the ball at all, and then 2 weeks later they're passing it quite nicely, you can say, well, I taught them something, or I coached them into a way of doing that properly. And it's a very sort of repetitive thing. So I kind of always thought, well, that's just what everyone has to go through. And then when you get more into mindset coaching and lifestyle and all that stuff, super, super hard to actually really account for, and for clients to even notice the differences. Often the time when I coach them, they'll come in and go like, oh, this just feels unbelievable, this new kind of way I am, and I can't really put value on it. The correct term would be priceless. It's priceless.
Yeah.
But they would usually say, I can't put value on that. Well, the value is priceless. Let's go with the MasterCard, definition. So how do you then, do you have like ways of tracking a client's development? Because even this, like, for example, what you just described, going from your previous life to now, do you have some sort of like ledger of things that have changed, and to go like, yeah, I banked that one, or I installed that one, and it's in the bag, so to speak?
Yeah, it's that's again a beautiful question. I think there is a ledger. I often ask my clients and also myself, what is the cost of not living the life that you really want? What is the cost that you're paying right now of not having the vocation that you want, the life that you want, the job that you want, the relationship that you want? And I think there is a way to calculate that. If you actually start to look at the bill, like for me, for a long time, I knew that I wanted a different kind of life, but it was hard to give up my old life because it was comfortable. And I was attached to that comfort of, and this is way back, I think 2007, 2008. I remember a moment I was sitting there, and thinking like, we live in a really weird world where pretty much our entire life is surrounded and revolves around the price of oil and how banks sort of, conversion rate, exchange rate in the banks is like everything in our society is kind of like based on those couple of things. It's like, who designed it?
or like, it's like, did you notice the pound fell against euro this morning at like by 0.1%? And it's like, No, I didn't.
Right. But the downstream effect of those things on our day-to-day life is huge. You know, like the decisions that government makes, or the decisions that, you know, as a society we make, are dependent on these couple of weird factors. And I was like, and I was in this place where you know, we started this conversation saying, you know, our individual change versus a change as society at large. At the time, I used to think, man, this society has to implode. You know,
Mhm.
we have to reset the thing. And I was
Yeah.
looking for like, what are the things? Like, how do we make that happen? And now I know that it has to come from within.
Mhm.
Like when we work with someone, we help someone get connected to themselves. It has ripple effects. So one of my clients, for example, uh, he is a businessman, and he's like in his early 30s, and he spent last 10 years building his business and becoming a really successful guy. And he's made the money. He's recently sold his company, and he's made it, right? He's like, so when we started talking last year, and this is about a year worth of coaching, last year when we started working together, the thing with him was, I've done all of this, but I don't know how to love myself.
Mm.
And what's the point of having, so he had all this money, but he couldn't really have it,
Yeah. Couldn't
you know?
feel the value, couldn't really feel the value. And it feels even worse when you can't love yourself. If you've got nothing, then it kind of helps you to think that, well, you know, I'm worthless anyway, I haven't got anything. But then when you got £1 billion, uh, you're like, well, I still don't love myself, I still feel I'm worthless, but I've got £1 billion. Now it feels even worse.
Right. And not even that, he's got more, at the time he had more worry about losing that money.
Yeah.
So he couldn't actually enjoy having all of this success, because now he had additional thing to worry about, that okay, I have all of this, now people are trying to come and get all this money.
Hmm.
So he couldn't really enjoy having it. He would buy a nice car, but then worry about the nice car.
Mm. Yeah.
So, you know, in some ways you can say, oh, you have all of this, but you don't really have it because you're not actually enjoying any of it. So, and this really interesting to, from then to now, tracking his progress. Because when we started to look into it, he was driven by proving his worth through his business.
Yeah.
Like, once I've had this money, I'm going to prove to the world that I am a successful guy, which means I am a successful man, which means I am a good enough man, which means I am worthy,
Mhm.
right? And so everything was driven by that, and he didn't have any boundaries. All of his life was driven from this place of like, you know, people would come to him from 10 different directions, and he would be doing things for everyone. And then at some point, he would feel that his back is against the wall, and he would lash out and destroy everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he never had any like long-term friends for that, because he didn't have good boundaries with himself and with other
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
So so there are examples like this. So when we start to put structure, where it's like, okay, let's start to work on boundaries. Let's start to work on how much of your life you're living in victim consciousness, which is,
Hmm.
life is happening to me. People are doing things to me, as opposed to, no, life is happening for me.
Hmm.
And there's a whole body of work around victim consciousness that you do. And those are almost like the foundation of this work. And when you do that, you start to see how much of your day-to-day life and things we do are driven from this place of, I have to be seen as less than or more than, less than or better than someone else. Your choices of what kind of car you buy, what kind of restaurants you go to, what kind of, how you travel, how you do things. Subconsciously, we have some kind of like chatter where we're always putting ourselves, if I'm going to do this, I'll be seen as less than or more better than. You want to please other people and be liked. So all of these places, kind of, you start to put structure and through coaching and through self-realization and self-inquiry. And you, once we put those structures in, life starts to change.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
like
Inevitably.
it takes time. You know, like this is why I often say to people, I give them this analogy. You know, like you've been walking in a jungle for whatever number of years. You know, in his case it was 30. In some cases it's 60 years,
Yeah.
and you've been going down this path completely sort of numbed out, and you are in the middle of nowhere, completely lost, and you suddenly wake up and you're like, oh fuck, I'm completely lost. And then what happens is people are like, oh, I want to just get back to civilization just like that. I don't want to put any work and I want to have it right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've just spent 40, 50, 60 years
Yeah.
in pattern, but I want a solution right now.
Yeah, talk about expectations, right? And
Right.
expectation setting. Like I kind of dislike this whole notion of like expectation management in the formal management science. And I realized, holy shit, that's like the crux of it all. Like in many respects, you want to set expectations to the negative end. You know, I coined this phrase that says, expect the worst, prepare the best. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so if you expect the absolute terrible weather, you know, bad economy, people being assholes, you know, you might trip up, like break a foot or something. You know, you expect all of that stuff. And when none of it happens, you feel like you're already like gained something. And then when you put effort on top of that, you're like, boy, I'm winning.
Yeah. 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 And I think it's that realizing that, you know, if you've spent so much time sleepwalking into the jungle,
It's a
it's
miracle
probably
you're
going to
still
take,
alive.
it's a miracle you're still alive. And you've got to put in about a year or a couple of years to find your way out of this mess. Like, I mean, you know, 30, 40, 50 years to 1 or 2 years, the ratio is still kind of like pretty good.
Awesome. Like even in investment terms, right? When you look at like stock market, you're getting like 25x return.
Right. So and I think that's the way to look at it. I think and you know, how do you put value on self-love? How do you put value on um, sort of feeling joy and being aligned to your own blueprint? And how do you put value on sort of living your life with a baseline of joy? I had times when I would wake up feeling dread. You know, every
Mm,
day of my life, I used to wake up feeling this like, oh my God, yeah, here goes another day. Let's put ourselves together and go through yet another day
yeah.
and work hard, blah, 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 blah. I don't have that anymore. I wake up feeling joyful every day. Well, most of the days.
Yeah. Looking forward. Yeah. It's the difference between looking forward to the, what the day's going to bring, as opposed to thinking about how you're going to make it through. And it's nothing to do with money.
Yeah,
It's to do with like psychological drag, like friction.
right. Yeah, totally. But and yes, and I think it's sometimes um, I think people don't realize that. I guess the point I want to make here is I think just the way in professional world we put emphasis on acquiring external skills. You know, we would go and spend money on corporate trainings. We would go and spend money on upskilling. We would
Mm,
go and spend money. I know I spent shit ton of money in getting MBA. Spend loads of money acquiring skills, you know, presentation skills, public speaking skills, and all of this kind of stuff, project management skills, and my formal education, right? And it was all to be seen as someone, to build my life externally. But I never spent any money until I started my personal growth journey. I didn't even think about spending money on my internal growth, on who I am and how I live my life and like my relationships. And that's the piece I think that is still interesting when when I talk to a lot of people, people don't think about it in that way, that if you actually invest in your internal growth, it pays off, exponentially in your external world.
Yeah, and what that just, I mean, I've heard this mentioned so many times, but it kind of clicked just now. And I've been watching, my wife and I uh, enjoy tapping into this, like the Housewives of Atlanta and all this kind of, when it's time to kind of just chill out a little bit. It's like put the Housewives of Atlanta, because it doesn't require any thinking. It's almost like
Yeah.
meditative. Oh, look, they're in another fight over something. And if anything, I start worrying when the fight hasn't happened for longer than 5 minutes. But what I learned from those programs is that those kind of people who are caught up in that kind of ego, narcissistic sort of chasing the fame, chasing the money, chasing status, um, they actually spend a lot of money. They're some of the biggest spenders, but they spend it towards branded goods like Gucci, luxury cars, all that kind of stuff. And so they're investing enormous amount of money on everything but themselves in a truly inner state kind of way. They might have a shrink, as they call them, but that shrink is usually there to just kind of, uh, soothe their ego.
Mm.
That's what they really do. And I've seen them, like, they just literally paid for a shrink to do like a little hypnosis thing for $25,000 for like a couple of hours of hypnosis around spider phobia,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, interesting, uh, so when do you think people are going to start spending in that way towards their inner self, like their inner well-being?
When is a good question. I don't know if when is in. I think that I do feel that there is a big change happening. I have seen this over the last sort of 7, 8, 10 years. I see this more and more in the commercial world where people are realizing, why am I running after this success? Quite often, I think people don't know how to get off that hamster wheel. I think quite often people feel that if I get off this hamster wheel and stop running after money, achievement, then my life will fall apart, and they are fearful of that. I think that's one of the big things that I see. So in my experience, I think people only change out of desperation or
Mm,
inspiration. In my case, I definitely got to a place where I was in a state of desperation emotionally, where like I have to make some change. And I guess I was lucky that I was in a transition point in my life between relationships, and I don't know if I was brave enough or it was whatever courageous enough to like make a decision to just say, okay, gonna take a year or two off. I was lucky enough, I suppose, that I had some cash in the bank to be able to do that.
mhm,
Um, but emotionally, I was definitely at a place of desperation where like, oh, I remember this moment where I was, I think it was, yeah, it was my first personal growth program that I was signing up for. And I remember this thing that like, oh, if I don't take this action now, I would probably be sitting here in 10 years time, have gone through a few more cycles of the same, probably more achievement, more success, maybe one or two other relationships as well.
yeah.
But I'll actually be in a similar spot, maybe worse, 10
Mhm,
years down the line. So the question was like, if not now, then when?
yeah.
I very clearly, it's like, okay, I have to, it was a scary place to spend money on something that didn't have this clear
Mhm,
goals.
mhm,
There wasn't an ROI. It's like, yeah, I invested so much. then I'm going to either get a new skill that will get me a better job,
Yeah.
or ROI in the sense of like, I'm going to give you this much money and you're going to return this much back to me. No, the ROI was my own internal freedom and I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Return on internal investment.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
ROII.
ROI.
Yeah, and it actually this reminds me of what happened when a good friend of mine and I went on this like 2 day sort of coaching sort of seminar type thing, where it was like kind of just a taste into the world of coaching and becoming a coach. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, and we sort of decided we'll go just for a laugh. We thought it was just kind of like a good excuse to spend like a weekend together. And we went there thinking we're not going to learn anything new. And basically, as we went there, the lady who was like the head coach kind of introducing us to the whole coaching sort of process, world, approach, differences, and all that stuff. I was sitting with my friend, and every 15 minutes or so, we're just getting this like aha moment, and we'll look at each other and just like burst out laughing, like going, oh shit, like I can't believe I've been like falling into that trap, right? And then the lady would talk for another 15 minutes, and we're like, and she thought we just weren't taking the whole thing seriously. Yeah,
Right.
we were having this kind of like enormous like release of energy, right? Where it was suddenly like, oh shit, dude, like I got to change just about every single approach in my life. And we came out of this like first day we came out, it's like, let's do a little bit of like wash up and sort of like lessons learned here. And I was having this like a combination of crying and laughing at the same time, and she was the same. And we're sitting on the side of the road in central London crying and laughing, and all these people going past us like, what the fuck are these people been smoking? And they were like, I was like, God, I got to change my life like completely, and everything is, and my business, my relations, like how I speak to people, like the whole lot. Yeah. But it was so like empowering at the same time. That whole thing like got us into a completely different line, and she is now running her own investment fund. So she's gone from this kind of person that was struggling to build her own startup to running an investment fund that's funding other startup, mingling with all these like super rich people and so on, and being super present with herself and not really attached to outcomes at all, but actually getting lots of outcomes. uh,
Right.
so what do you, how is business going for you? And do you have like business goals that, for example, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I, in 2019, I closed down one of the businesses that I was running, and I pretty much took on like 2019 off, and 2020 is now actually being forced on me. Life is happening for me. Um, so business is good. We have, so what we are doing is right now building a new set of services for especially for professionals, for people like, I have this belief that I work with people who have had a similar trajectory to my life, which is professional people like me running after achievement and success to get somewhere, and they've gone through a couple of rounds of that and got to a place where they find that the promises that were made, and the promise was that once you get there you will feel happy, you will feel satisfied, you would feel fulfilled, that doesn't exist,
Mm.
you know. And they often wake up thinking, it's like, oh, I know I have a lot of energy and this is great, but I am moving towards burnout. I am moving towards, like, when I will look back at my life 5, 10, 15 years down the line, I will wonder why I didn't make a decision to go on a different path, or even just like, why didn't I spend time doing things that I really wanted to do? And in the same way, I think relationships, and I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think quite often when we talk about coaching and mindset, a lot of it is talked about in terms of purpose um, and whether you are working or moving to your business and stuff like that. But I
Mm,
think a big part of this transformation is connection.
mm,
This was certainly true for me, in that ultimately, whether we are working or for someone else or we have our own business, it's all about connecting with people.
mhm,
The richness that we have in our life comes from the quality of connection we have with ourselves and with people. And this is a one big area that I think as professional people, we quite often overlook. We separate our professional life and personal life. We talk about work-life balance, but I don't believe in a work-life balance. I believe that it's an integration
mhm.
of the two, because you
It's
can't just
balance. It's just
compartmentalize.
balance.
It's just balance. You can't just compartmentalize the, oh, I'll be with people I work with, I'll be in one way, and when I get home I'll be a different person. No, you are one human being, and it's about how to bring that authenticity and honesty in every part of your life. So I think connection and relationships is a big part that often gets missed, I think, in transformational circles. And I believe that those two things go hand in hand. Um, and uh, so, yeah, in terms of like what we are doing with the business is we built this framework, which is like a 4-part framework, where the first part is defining our identity. It's like, how did we get to define our identity? How are our boundaries? Um, what's our shadow? What does our shadow look like? Or places where can we take 100% responsibility for our life? Um, so we work on that. What are our core belief system in which we define the way? What's our cultural conditioning that we operate within? So that's one part of defining our identity. The second part is unlearning a lot of the skills rather than adding more skills. It's about how do you like how do you have attuned attention? How do you like connect to your body and your intuition and live your life from that place? And the third part is, I think you said something earlier about um, consistent practices. I believe that we cannot have any level of sustained. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah. All good. All
I think
good.
I've lost you somewhere. Hold on.
I can hear you perfectly fine.
1 second. So yeah, I think the third part is this practices, where I believe that you can do all kind of work, but unless you build sustained, regular, disciplined practices in life, nothing will change. And I think the fourth part, of the framework we built is what we called play. So living your life as infinite game, where you're not trying to win or lose, but you're playing this game of life just to play. And those are kind of
Mm,
like the four key areas that we've been developing over the last few months. And we put together a 7-week program where we teach people and where we take people through all of these areas to like get to a place where you can have mastery and learn to live life and flow on demand.
mhm, mhm.
So that's what we've been working on over the last few months.
That sounds fantastic, and it's super on point, and sounds to me like a fantastic thing that people should get engaged with. And now's the best time, really, because I think it looks like the world that we are going to live in, at least for a little bit, going forward is going to be very challenging. So whatever external circumstances that we've had so far that we thought were challenging, now we're getting like even more challenging circumstances, which means that flow, balance, good mental health, solid relationships, good practices and habits, and uh, building yourself up, sensitivity and resilience all integrated, is the way forward, no matter what the circumstances out there are.
Amen, brother. I
And
think
so,
so.
so what does it mean to be a sensitive man? You know, I
Oh,
sometimes I listen to this guy Jesse Peterson, who's like one of the kind of kooky Christian priests, right? And it's like beta, beta, right? Is that a beta, or is it, you know, it, does that take away from your alphaness if you're a sensitive man? And also, when you say that sensitive man, it reminds me of Eddie Murphy's stand-up where he talks about Michael Jackson, and he goes, everyone loves Michael Jackson because Michael's so sensitive. So is it so sensitive like that, or is it different kind of sensitive?
um, I think for me, it's the place where um, like I don't pretend to cover my heart, um, or block the feelings or my emotions in order to um, pretend that I can take it. You know, I think I've lived a huge part of my life pretending uh, that things don't matter to me. You know, like uh, anything could be happening and I'm not fazed by it. Uh, and the result of that was, I think, I put blocks and barriers and walls in front of my heart and stopped feeling things. You know, and when you stop feeling things, what happens is that, for me, what happened was I was living in a very narrow bandwidth of emotions, never allowing myself to feel any sadness, any negative emotions, any anger. Um, but that also meant was I never allowed myself to feel any joy, any happiness, because those things are kind of uh, uh, like inversely proportional.
Mm.
You know, they're correlated in that if you stop feeling sadness and all the negative emotions, you stop feeling positive emotions as well. So when I talk about sensitivity, is that um, my and it's not like that I've perfected this place. I still, you know, sometimes get hurt and block myself and all these kind of things. But more and more, I allow myself to feel the feelings and not try and not put the walls up. Because when you do that, I think we feel fully alive. I think someone wise said that it's when our heart breaks, that's when we feel the most alive. And uh, I think in most, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, in most places we are told that, oh no, you have to protect your heart. And protection of your heart means that you have to block the feelings. And when you block your feelings, you make yourself numb. And then life, in my experience, life becomes monochrome. It becomes black and white.
Yeah. Um, that's as sensitive as the stage 6 of spiral dynamics, and it's beyond rational. And yeah, I do find that a lot of men, quote unquote men, are that they find that very, very sort of alien to them, to tap into their feelings and sensibilities, even senses and sensibilities, and just work with that as well, because
Yeah.
it eventually becomes part of rational thinking to say, hey, it's rational to actually go like, how do I feel? Because it's irrational to be working against like working against your own feelings, because that over time that turns into cancer, heart attacks, brain damage, all that kind of stuff, because it's like the body does not actually, the nervous system does not actually flow. It's like choked up at some places, and wherever it's choked up at, that's where you develop bad physical illness. uh,
Yeah.
so you might as well let your emotions flow and also learn how to transmute them and manage them and, you know, use them in the wisest way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
And you become
And
more
quite often,
powerful that way, right?
yeah. And I think quite often men especially are trained not to feel those emotions, or told that, as you were saying, like, sensitivity is not alpha,
Mhm.
or sensitivity is somehow Michael Jackson.
It's so
So, and
sensitive.
these are those memes, right? There are those
Yeah.
memes. And I think the way I look at integration is the integration of those masculine and feminine attributes. It's not that you have to be more masculine or more feminine. I think in today's world anyway, I feel that we have to be both more masculine and more feminine. Like, have the sense of, um, like, what we call masculine integrity, have the sense of like being able to do things that we want to do, and at the same time the feminine side is our expression, our creativity, our sensitivity, our vulnerability. And when we have both of that, I think we get both best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I feel that that's what makes us an integrated man, a
Yeah, and
human
it's
being.
it's it's what I call sometimes referred to as subconscious awe, because
Mm.
people tend to think that they're either masculine or feminine, whereas I turn those ores into ants, and then magic happens because you're now masculine and feminine,
Right.
and now you suddenly realize, oh, you're rebalancing your life and you're able to actually get along with women a lot better if you're a guy, because you actually tapped into that mode of being effectively, and you're able to balance your relationships better, as you were saying, which is essential. And then everything just flows much nicer, because the last thing you want is some sort of drama like on the Housewives of Atlanta, where they're just like every 2 minutes like turning the table over, and it's a constant sort of like firefighting process in some of the most beautiful environments. And it's like, well, that I'd rather be just bare naked in nature and just more balanced.
Yeah.
But there's a way of having both, right? There's a way of
Yeah.
having both wealth and balance. And again, it's not an or, it's an and. So,
Yeah. Definitely.
uh,
Yes, and is what I like as well. I feel that it's almost like I look at masculine and feminine as a scale, and some of us have been conditioned to have more masculine essence, some of us has been conditioned to have more feminine, and ultimately, personally, I want to be able to travel anywhere on that scale,
mm,
depending on what's needed.
mhm,
If I am at work and working on a task, and what's needed is my focus and my masculine uh,
mhm,
attributes, then I want to be able to master that.
mhm,
And then if I am in my relationship and I want to be fully, open hearted and sensitive and vulnerable, then I want to be able to access that too and be a
mhm,
master at that.
mm, yeah.
And yeah, yes, and I want that. I want the best of both worlds. I want to have my cake and eat it.
Well, on that note, brother, I thank you
Yeah.
so much for talking to me, and once again, just remind people where they can find you and what kind of people you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason, having me here. It was fun. I am available on my website, nibana.life, so people can reach me there, or they can send me an email, kapil@nibana.life. And we're on all social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find us that way. And in terms of the kind of people we're looking for, I think people who are at a crossroads of
Mm-hmm.
sort, at a turning point in their life, where they feel that they want to go from good to better,
Mm-hmm.
either in terms of being aligned to their purpose, being aligned to themselves, or in their relationships. They want to have thriving relationships. One of the things I really enjoy is working on the masculine, feminine, and man-woman dynamics. I just love that part. So if you are curious about any of those things, you please ping me, reach out to me, and let's have a chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my brother, and all the best to you.
Thanks so much, Jason.
Bye.